I just wanted in this video here to quickly cover off a few points about organizing your folders and getting started with your After Effects project. So in this course we've covered quite a bit on how to manage your documents, how to make sure that you name files appropriately, put things in logical, well-named folders, and that you have a sensible sort of structure throughout so that you don't lose your work. The better organized you are, the better your work will go when it comes to working with computers, especially. But that's particularly true when you're working with After Effects. You really need to keep your work super organized. So let's have a look at that to begin with before we dive into After Effects itself. Okay, so here I am I'm in the Finder, and I've got a Finder window open here. I've got it displayed in column view. In my opinion, column view is by far the best way to view your documents, whether you're opening and saving documents from within an application, or whether you're working in the Finder, managing your documents there. And you can access that in the Finder by using this little widget here. The reason that column view is particularly good is because you can see at a glance the structure of your file system, which folders are where and which files are in which folders. You can just see that at a glance, which you can't see in something like icon view, for example, or even, list view. List view is, will allow you to see that if you explore it, but column view has the advantage of giving you that structure at a glance. So let's have a look at the way I've organized things here. So on the left here, in my sidebar, I've got a little shortcut to my OneDrive folder. As we know, OneDrive folder is just a folder stored on the hard drive. But it is monitored by this little thing, the OneDrive app. It's constantly watching that folder when it's running and you're signed into it, and it's checking for when things are added or updated or changed or indeed removed. Okay, within that I've got a folder for this course. It's called it C4 Digital for Cert 4 Digital, and within that I've got a folder for this assessment. So very clear, very obvious names. You can't mistake it for anything else. All right. And inside the Assessment 3 folder, I've got a folder that I've called Assets. Okay. So one thing that's very important is that you don't actually rename any of your folders here when you start working in your After Effects project. Your file names have to remain exactly as you set them, unless you have a very good reason to alter them. If you do alter them, you will need to tell After Effects where they are, and that can be a bit of a pain, especially with a complex project. All right, so I've got a folder in here called Assets, where I'm storing things like these Adobe Illustrator files, for example, that I'm going to use for building my After Effects animations. Okay. In the folder above, inside this Assessment 3 folder, this is where I'm going to actually store the projects themselves. Okay, and neither the projects nor this Assets folder nor the file names of the things once I've imported them into After Effects, none of those are going to change after the fact. All right. Let's get into the process of setting up a new After Effects project. So to sort of launch After Effects here, you could launch it just by typing Command Space, typing in the name, After Adobe, part of the file name there. I'm just typing in After. All right, it gives me this one here, Adobe After Effects 2025. That's the one that I want. It's the latest version. What you don't want, of course, is the render engine. You can ignore that, at least for the time being. this is the one that we want, Adobe After Effects 2025. So I'm just going to click on that. Here I am in After Effects. Okay, so I've got a bunch of recent sort of projects down here, but I'm going to walk you through the process of setting up a new project. Now I could just click on this button here, but I'll show you where it is in the menus, because I think one of the best things on the Mac is the menu bar up here. And within these menus, you will find all of the commands you need. So if you're ever lost or uncertain, just start digging through these menus, or indeed come over to the help menu and type in the name of the command that you're after there. All right, so I'm going to come back to the file menu, go to this new section here and choose this option, new project. Now, it's worth noting that unlike other apps, the shortcut for a new project is not Command N. Now, from working in Photoshop and Illustrator, you might expect that it would be. The reason that it is not, we'll get to in a bit. It's really because you use that Command N keyboard shortcut is reserved for making a new composition within a project. It's by far the more common thing that you do. So this keyboard shortcut here is actually Command Option N, that funny little symbol there to the left of that command symbol, that rosette symbol, means option. You'll find the option key to the left of your command key, or to the right of it on the right hand side of your keyboard. Okay, so I'm going to set up a new project. All right, so I've mentioned that just now that the Command N keyboard shortcut is reserved for making a new composition. Now, I could, of course, just click on this little handy shortcut here, New Composition, because that's where we want to start. Instead, I'm going to come up to the Composition menu and choose New Composition, or what I would in fact always do when working on my own is hit Command N. Okay, so that brings up the settings for a composition. So a composition is really Adobe After Effects terminology for a sequence. It's basically an animation sequence. I'm not sure what the reason is why they call it a composition, but there we are. Anyway, so to begin with, composition name. Now, you can wind up with a lot of different compositions, but at its simplest, you just have one main sequence that you do all of your animation in. Okay, so let's start there. I'm going to call this one main. This will be my main sequence. It might be the only composition that I put inside my project, or it may be one of many, but at any rate, this is going to be the primary sequence where I have my animations. Okay, now we need to work to these dimensions that I happen to have already set up here, 1920 pixels wide and 1080 pixels high, and we want a frame rate of 30 frames per second. Now, one preset under here, under this preset menu drop down, that has all of those is this one, Social Media Landscape HD. You can see that it has those familiar dimensions there, 1920 by 1080 pixels, and a frame rate of 30 frames per second, 30 FPS. All right, so I'm just going to click on that. All right, let's keep going down. We've got our frame rate set there to 30 frames per second. Resolution is full. You can leave it at that. Start time code should be 0. And the duration should be 1 minute. Okay, so the default actually is 30 seconds. Mine says a minute because I've done quite a few 1 minute compositions lately. Okay, so let's have a look at time code, because this might be new to you. The first number at the left here is the duration in hours. Now, that's also the reason it's only showing a single 0 there, a single digit. It's not many animations or movies or anything go more than, say, 9 hours. You know, the majority would be considerably shorter than that. So a single digit, more than adequate for almost everything. The next two digits, so if that's hours, you might guess that this is minutes. And indeed it is. So we have 0, 1 minutes for our duration. Next one is seconds. This last one is not milliseconds or anything like that. It is in fact frames, number of frames. So we want exactly 1 minute. All right, let's have a look at the background color. Now this is, for you, will probably default to a black initially. I'm going to set mine to something like this, kind of a off-white, if you like, a kind of an ivory, slightly warm white, slightly grayed out. Okay, and it's calling that a pale yellow. Okay, After Effects, I'm not going to argue with you on that. Okay, let's hit OK. Boom. All right. So let's go on a little bit of a tour around the After Effects interface. Up here, we've got the toolbar. Now in Illustrator and Photoshop that we're more used to, the toolbar is vertical and usually on the left-hand side of the screen. This one's running horizontally because, video files are normally the more common format. Typically in the past has been something wide, a landscape view like this one here. And so to accommodate that better on screen, the toolbar runs horizontally instead, freeing up more space in the layout on screen. All right. Now there are a few familiar tools here as well as some unfamiliar ones. Okay, the selection tool, very similar to its counterpart in Adobe Illustrator. Use it for grabbing objects on screen, maybe moving them around. The hand tool, used for so when you're zoomed in a bit, panning around your scene. Zoom tool, very similar to, in fact, identical to its counterparts in Illustrator and Photoshop. And we've got a few other special tools. These are really for operating the cameras, virtual cameras in After Effects. More on that in videos to come. Rotation tool, shape tool. We'll definitely be using that a little bit, although our assets will be created generally in Illustrator and Photoshop. Got a pen tool, very useful for drawing not just shapes but for things like motion paths, though again we'll be creating our motion paths in Illustrator. Type tool, and so on. So quite a few familiar things there, as well as some new ones that we'll be getting to. Now over here, let's start at the left. We've got a bunch of different panels. Effect controls we won't worry about for now, but that's where controls for, as the name suggests, various effects such as blur and color adjustments and things like that. That's where those go. And those things, unlike things, of course, their equivalents in Photoshop or Illustrator, you can actually animate your effects. All right. But super important, the project panel. So this is where we're going to store all of our assets and indeed our compositions. And you can see our main composition that we've made there is represented inside this, the project panel. So you can think of this as being a bit like a kind of a junk drawer where you put all your stuff, all of your assets, all of the shapes and so on that you're going to actually put into your project and animate or otherwise affect over time. All right, let's have a look on the right over here. Now here's something new. The preview panel. This has some playback controls. It's most importantly the play button there. If you click on that, the animation starts playing. Notice it changes to this little block. That means you can stop playback of your video. All right. Now you may have noticed this little thing moving along here as I did so. All right. So this is actually our timeline down here, going from 0 seconds up to 1 minute for our main composition. So we'll get to more on that in a bit, but I just thought that would be interesting to point that out. So let's come back to the preview panel here. We can go to the start of our composition, our animation sequence, go back a frame, forwards a frame, or go to the last frame, go to the end. Right down here we have something that is more familiar, the properties panel. All right, there's no selection at the moment, so nothing's showing up here, but it will do things. It'll show things just as it does it's in Illustrator or Photoshop that you can change, such as things like fill colors or typefaces, things of that sort, depending on what you're doing. We have an alignment tool, very much like the equivalent in Illustrator. Audio. More of that in coming content. All right, but here we have effects and presets. So again, not going to look at that today, but many of you will want to dig through this for effects such as blur or for color corrections or other things. Okay. All right, so we've got our main composition, and that's actually represented down here. You see it says main, and this is in fact really the sort of the layers panel down here. So we have layers, just like we do, or very similar to those in Illustrator or Photoshop. And relating to that, we have this little icon, the visibility icon, which we can use to show or hide different layers. Various other controls, audio, soloing that layer, so it just runs on its own. And this also is familiar from Illustrator and Photoshop, a lock icon. You can lock a layer. All right. All of these other things, I'm not going to worry about too much right now, but there are quite a few other little extra controls that are new to the After Effects context. All right. How about we get something in here and start animating in our main sequence? So I'm going to come back to the File menu, which makes sense because we're doing a file operation. Go to File, Import, and choose this option, File, or Command-I. Now I always use the keyboard shortcut. I recommend that you learn these keyboard shortcuts too. They speed up your work. All right, let's do this. Okay, so here we have an import window. I've opened mine out just so I can really navigate through my file system. I recommend you do that as well. I'm going to come down here to my OneDrive, to my Cert for Digital folder, go to Assessment 3, go to Assets, and pull out a shape here. Which one will I choose? This one looks like fun. Let's go with that. Okay. So before I just hit on that open button, just want to check a couple of things. One is to make sure that, yes, it's an Illustrator file. I want to import it as footage. Now, it is not, in fact, actually video footage. It's just a still image, an Adobe Illustrator drawing. But we're treating it as though it is footage. I don't want to create a new composition, so I want to make sure that's not checked, nor is it a sequence of any kind. So I want to make sure that that's not checked either. Right, both of those must be blank. All right, now I'm going to click on Open. All right, so we have some more import options. Import kind is footage. And we have the option to choose a particular layer. All right, now I've only got one layer in this document, but if you're working with multiples, you could select a particular layer there. So I'll show you that sort of process in a little bit as well. All right, let's click on OK. All right, so I've got my shape here. I could either drag it over here onto this central area, which shows again composition main. So this is actually, if you like, the stage. So I could drag it over here, or I'm actually going to just drag it from the project panel down here so it becomes a layer. And there it is there, and you can see it as well up here in my composition. I'm going to, while I'm at it, it's going to come down here to this little drop down and tell it to fit that. So just so that I can make sure that I can see my entire animation area on screen there. All right, so let's have a look at this. If I make sure I have my selection tool here, I can actually grab that shape and move it around, and I can resize it using these little resize handles, just like their counterparts in Illustrator and Photoshop. And I'm scaling it down. As I'm doing this, I'm first holding down the Shift key on my keyboard. So that ensures that I'm keeping it proportional as I scale it. Right. So grab that handle, hold down the Shift key, and scale it. Let's scale it down a bit. Grab that handle, hold down the Shift key, scale it down. Let's position it on screen where I want it. Now I'm going to move it from, have it animate over, say, a second or two from there to there. All right, so let's come down to the timeline. So we've got the layers down here, we've got the object we just placed there, and we've got the timeline on the right. Okay, so this is showing the entire sequence here, the entire composition from time 0 to time 60 seconds or 1 minute up here. Now, 1 minute doesn't seem like very much. It in fact is, of course, when you're doing animation. So what I want to do is to actually zoom in a little bit on this part of the timeline. Now I could use this little handy little slider here. That zooms me in a bit. Or, even easier, this little widget up here. So it's got these little blue handles. So I'm going to grab that right hand one. Bring that down here. And now it's even in fact showing me the frames. So it's time 0, 15 frames, 1 second, or 30 frames, and so on. All right, so what have we got here? So I've got down here, I've also got the current time indicator, this little wedge-like thing with a blue, vertical blue line dropping down there. So I can grab that, I can drag that around the timeline here, effectively traveling in time. All right, now, so far I haven't built any animation in, so nothing happens when I do that, but soon it will. All right, so let's come over to the layer here. And you see this little thing, this little chevron, a little disclosure triangle, as we call it. I know it only has 2 sides, but we do call it disclosure triangle anyway. So let's open that up. And what we've got is something interesting here. Another little disclosure triangle icon there, the word transform. Now, if that's not an invitation to do some animation, I don't know what is. All right, so let's open that up. And we've got a whole bunch of these little things, these little channels here, if you like, or tracks. So one of them is this one, position. But we can also animate the scale, the rotation, the opacity, how transparent our asset is, our object. But I'm going to start with position. Okay, so how do you start animating? See that little stopwatch icon there? All right, so this little stopwatch icon indicates that you can animate something. Wherever you see this in After Effects, it's an indication that you can do some animation on that property. All right, so I'm just going to click on that. You see it highlights in blue. And a couple of things happen here. One, so we get this little diamond shape at time 0. This diamond shape here indicates a keyframe. So it's a point at which something changes in our sequence. So, and if we look over to the left here, you can see that that's also highlighted in blue. If I mouse over that, it says add or remove keyframe at current time. So I could remove that keyframe here. I've also got these little triangles, these are little arrows, so these are for moving between keyframes. If there were more keyframes along here, I could navigate to the next one using that right triangle there rather, for example. All right, so this keyframe here, that sets this position for our object up here at time 0. All right, so let's travel in time now using the slider here. I'm going to come to the 1 second mark, or 30 frames. And I'm going to set another keyframe using the add keyframe button. All right, let's move that over there. All right, so notice that I'm changing the position of this object at this 1 second mark. And as I do so, it's putting this little sort of dotted line along there. All right, this just indicates the motion that this object is going to go in from the starting point to the finishing point here. By the way, I kept that horizontal by holding down the Shift key as I dragged that across. All right, so let's go back to the first frame. I'm just going to use the current time indicator again here, this little playhead thing. Drag that back. All right, and you can see that moving there as we were traveling effectively backwards in time in our animation. All right, now I'm going to come over to the preview panel here and just preview that by hitting that play button. There we have that animation taking place there. All right, so I can continue to build out this animation. So I might just come to the next 15 seconds along, add another keyframe, change the position of the object, pop down here, add another keyframe, change its position, and so on. So you can see that this is starting to animate quite nicely there. All right, I can play that back. How's that? And if I want to change the timing of this in any way, I can actually grab these individual keyframes here, just click on them individually and rearrange their position in time. Notice that if I'm spreading these keyframes out further in time, my animation slows down. If I bring them close together, the animation will speed up. Like so. All right, now I am, of course, before I go any further, going to save this project. So I'm going to go to the File menu, choose Save, or Command S. Now I recommend that you hit Command S early and often, save your work. And because this is the first time I'm saving the project, it opens up with this Save As dialog here. So I do not want to save it into my assets folder. So I'm going to make sure again that I'm on the right track. I'm going to go to my Cert for Digital folder here, go to Assessment 3. This is where I want to save my project, not in the assets folder. Very important. And I'm going to call it something like AT3 play, something like that. All right. In fact, I'm going to be good and use the file naming protocol. Like so. Okay. So we have it, our first little animation.